Welcome back to Life with the Spectrum. I'm your host, Gina Cavalli. I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, but I'm a mom that lives life with the spectrum. And as we embark on this journey together, I told you no question is too big or too small to ask. You can comment, like, share below, and we're going to find out the answers together. The best part is I get to speak with really amazing people like this lovely lady, Marcia Lindner. How are you?
Thanks for the sweet compliment.
It has been far too long since we've seen each other. Of course, pre-COVID, and then COVID took place. And so, how has
And
life
there's
been for
been
you?
so many changes, so many changes. How has life been for me? For me, it's been great. I've gotten my ADHD, anxiety, depression daughter off to college and almost through her first year.
Okay.
I have my IEP language processing uh, kiddo through 11th grade and ready for his senior year
Senior
in
year.
college applications.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Marcia, I don't know if it's because you've had two children that had specific challenges that you decided to turn your eyes and attention and become an advocate. And everybody has been waiting for me to talk to you. So, can you please first explain what the heck is an advocate? Because so many parents are like, do I need one?
So that's a really great question. An advocate is an individual who hopefully has been trained by somebody, whether it's a COPA trained. COPA is the Council of Parents, Advocates, and Attorneys. It's a national organization, or training through someplace like Rights Law, or training through a local entity here in Georgia that might be parent to parent, but has
Okay.
had some kind of training on the IEP process, on IDEA, and understands parents' rights and how the process works.
And the child's rights, correct?
And the child's rights, although most of the rights are really for the parents,
Okay.
um, because their children are, until age 18, their children actually, the decisions are actually up to the parents. There is
Correct.
a transition planning piece that begins when a child is either in ninth grade or turns 14 years of age in the state of Georgia. That varies from state to state, but in the state of Georgia, that is 14. That the student is supposed to be a part of, but that doesn't always happen depending on their cognitive level. But at 18, regardless of cognitive level, the rights of the parents cease and the student's rights take over unless there is some sort of legal paperwork that's a part of that process.
And can you help with it? Does an advocate, can they help with that legal paperwork?
Not usually. That's usually something you need to go to an attorney
Attorney
for.
for?
And
Okay.
there's a whole world of thought about whether, particularly for a child with an intellectual disability, whether you're seeking full guardianship or only guardianship of financial and legal decisions,
Okay.
because there's some impact if your child is going to a program like Georgia Tech or Kennesaw's secondary education program. They don't want those kids to have a full guardianship, because part of the program is gaining independence. So I would encourage anybody whose kids are at that state to consult an attorney about what's best. And if it's the right attorney who knows special ed and special ed law and needs of special ed students, they should be able to weigh which kind of guardianship is appropriate.
So I want to explain what kind of took place in our particular family when Lyric was off at public school. He was introduced here in Georgia in kindergarten, and then went on to first grade. And the IEPs were written, and we had IEPs in Colorado, but it was a little different, and it does vary state to state. But for the most part, in general, here's a service, there's a service, your child can get this service, that service, whatnot. And I said, I just feel like Lyric is being left behind, and I am not going to let that happen. I will die and go broke before I let any of this happen to Lyric, because he's just a superstar, and he's super bright, and he's super sweet. And come on, we got to give this kid a 100% chance, just like any other child would have. And I was at a Stars, which is through the YMCA, and a mom was talking to me, and she goes, well, I just call my advocate and she comes with me. And I said, well, what is that? I thought I was Lyric's advocate. And she goes, no, 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 no. She goes, you think you're Lyric's advocate, and yes, you are, but you don't know the ways of which county we live in, which is Cobb County, or the state of Georgia, which is the state we live in. And I said, well, what does an advocate do? And they said, well, one, if you hire one, they show up and the school knows then you mean business, that you are out to get every single possible service and opportunity given to your child, whether it's speech and OT, maybe you need to go a little bit longer, a little less, or whatever the case may be. So that's how I ended up with your phone number. And I called, and it was fairly seamless. I remember you asking me for a little bit of information about Lyric and that you wanted to see his current IEP. And then when it was IEP time, you pretty much came with me and we sat down and we tackled it. And the IEP was shorter. It was less, I want to say, boogered up with things that maybe I couldn't understand. And then we walked away, and I felt like the next, that everything was in place for Lyric. And I truly owe that to you. Thank you so much.
Well, first, you're welcome.
That's what you do for everyone, right?
So that is what I do. I do
Yay.
an initial consultation. Basically, I ask the parents for a boatload of documentation so that I can know from a paperwork perspective who your child is and how that child is presenting at school. Because something that often happens is I'll get a call from a parent that they're seeing something at home and they're being told that at school, that's not what they're seeing. And sometimes that really happens. Our kids are sometimes very different away from us. I remember growing up, my mom used to always say to me, well, if you're going to misbehave, I'd rather you misbehave at home than out in public, because at least people think I'm raising you the right way. I think as parents, that's how we all feel. And sometimes our kids feel that too, right? They feel that they have to perform at a certain level at school, or they have to hold it together. But dang, as soon as they hit that door after school, they just melt. And so all these behaviors that we see at home sometimes aren't seen at school. Sometimes they are seen at school and the schools don't want to deal with it. And you have to kind of ferret that out. And sometimes a parent doesn't know the questions to ask in that IEP meeting to kind of make teachers go a little deeper than what they normally would do.
Well, when you have a class of 25,
Correct. The other thing that bringing an advocate does for you is almost, I can't think of a single county in the greater Atlanta area that when you check that little box that you're bringing an advocate with you, or you send that email telling them you're bringing that advocate with you, it is automatic that a district coordinator, whoever's assigned to that school, comes out to that school for that meeting. They're not going to let that school team meet with an advocate without a district person being there. A lot of times that really frightens parents, right? But 9 times out of 10, in fact, I would even say 99 times out of 100, it really ends up being to the benefit of parents that that district person is there, because a school team knows what they know, knows how it's done within their school, and knows what has always happened in their school. They're not always able to see sort of that bigger picture of
Sure.
what's done across the district. So I might go into a meeting and ask for a student to have a truncated day because they're having emotional meltdowns and the
Right.
day is too long for them, and we need to get them some intense therapy and then sort of build back up to a full day of school. And that school's never had anybody ask them for that. And how can they truncate a kid's school day and da 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 da? And so their initial reaction, if you were to go into that meeting alone, might be, no, we don't do that here, right?
And then the parent goes, "Oh, okay, let's move on." Because
Correct.
you don't know the difference.
Correct. When an advocate is there and asks for it, if it were just the school team, that advocate might get shut down too. But when a district supervisor is there and they know that this is done within their county, or they know that it's done within other counties, all of a sudden you're going to get a different response, perhaps.
I bet.
Now, an advocate can't force the team to do any, can't force a decision upon the team,
Sure.
right? There's no guarantee just because you bring an advocate into a meeting that what you're asking for is going to happen.
Okay.
But there's a greater chance that the advocate is going to help you bring in the data. Every school team is data driven, that
Yes.
they're going to help you bring in the data to show that your child has whatever the need it is that you're asking for, or needs that you're asking for.
Do you know I still keep in touch with the SSA from Lyrics Public School? That's what they call them. She was in charge of that particular school and has like 4 or 5 others, because we transitioned Lyric to a private school that specializes with kids on the spectrum. And I still keep in touch with her. We still talk about the SB 10 money. We still talk about IEPs. And up until just last year, that IEP had transferred over. So I got the 2 schools to meet with me and discuss so that everybody was in the loop as to who Lyric was, and gave them a best snapshot of coming out of public and where he could fit in to this new private school. I also can't help but think that you've inspired so many parents, Marcia, whether you know it or not, to that first meeting. I remember sitting with you and I just thought to myself, I was like, man, she knows her. And I want to be her. Like, how do I do this? How do I become a better advocate, mother wise, for my son? Because you asked the questions that it wouldn't have dawned on me to ask. It wouldn't have, I think because we as parents we're so emotional about our children, right? And so when we go into a meeting, we are the first to cop an attitude. We're the first to get aggressive and defensive and, or cower down or whatever. And here you are, cool as a cucumber. And you make it look very easy to stand up and ask those questions, helping parents then further ask those questions when it's not, say, an IEP meeting, or it's just like a one-on-one email with the teacher or something like that. I think you empowered people, and you don't even know that you do this, or do you? I hope you
I
do.
do. I actually tell people all the time, except for the fact that I don't think this will ever happen. The best thing that I can do as an advocate is teach you how to do what I do so you don't need me anymore.
Okay. Because you really did empower me, Marcia. I hope that's the one thing I'd love for you to take away from this, is that you empowered me to ask some more questions, to ask and to not just be okay with, oh well, no, no, I don't think so. No, no, I want an answer. And that's what you gave to me at
Or
each
I
meeting.
don't understand your answer, so explain it to me a different way, because
Yes.
every parent has a right to understand what happens in an IEP, what the long-term impact is of the decisions that you're making now. And I like to tell parents, I want take a step back and think about what the purpose of IDEA is. The purpose of IDEA is to make sure that children who learn differently are prepared at the time that they finish their secondary education to either seek further education, post-secondary education,
Right.
to enter the workforce and or to live independently, right? Our schools tend to only focus on the academics, but there's a
Right.
whole world when you look at what does it take to be able, particularly when we're talking about our spectrum kids, what does it take to be able to hold a job when you're on the spectrum,
Yeah.
right? What does that mean about communicating and interacting with your team members? What does that mean in terms of living independently, right? In terms of being able to prepare your own meals, being able to a lot of spectrum kids don't drive. So that means they're going to be dependent on public transportation. Have they been taught somewhere down the line how to read a map and a train schedule? Those are all skills they should be getting at school.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, because now we know that IEPs will actually transfer from high school into colleges.
Well,
So
they don't actually transfer. I mean,
they don't,
I'm gonna
oh,
take a step back, right?
okay, because
So
I thought they did.
no, they
Okay.
don't. There is no such thing as an IEP in college. What you have in college is the college version of a 504. They are accommodations,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
They are not changing. Your kid is going to have to take an exam like anybody else, right? If that's what their grade is based on, that's what their grade is based on. Now, they may take that exam
In a
in
quiet room.
their learning center with an individual proctor or a group proctor, but it's not. The thing that they're going to have to understand is that they have the responsibility to schedule that proctor on whatever the learning center's time frame is, and that they have to choose to seek those services. They aren't provided to them. They have to elect to have them. So the way most colleges work is you send in paperwork saying you're a student with a disability.
Okay.
They have somebody from their disability services contact you. You either go in for a meeting, or in these days, you might have a virtual meeting to go over your learning profile. Usually you've sent either a 504 or an IEP and
So they,
an adult version of a psych ed report. When I
okay.
say an adult version, when your child is 16 years and I think 8 months, I'd have to check that to be sure, but some of the rating scales and testing platforms that are used only go to age 16, and then at 16 they change to an adult version. The colleges want to see that adult version, so you need to make sure that your child in their second half of 11th grade or in 12th grade is getting an updated psych ed evaluation with those adult scales.
And just so you know, no matter what county you live in, and I believe no matter what county in the state or the country, schools have to provide those psych evals, I believe, for free.
They do.
And so
Now,
I wouldn't go pay. It is a different one than the $5,000 you would pay from an actual psychologist, but they serve the purpose, and you get just a good snapshot, just as you would from a psychologist that you pay $5,000. Just say,
correct.
save
But
yourself some money.
if you have a child who had an evaluation in 9th or 10th grade, you need to be pushing, because they're only required to finish that next evaluation when you request it by the time your student's next eligibility date is due. So if your child had an evaluation in 10th grade and you're now asking the end of 11th grade or 12th grade for another evaluation, they could push it off, in which case you might find yourself having to pay for a private evaluation. Most of the time that doesn't happen. They know that their students need it for college.
Sure.
And usually they're going to make sure it gets done. You just may be under the gun getting it.
Right.
when I take on a new client, particularly if I take them on in elementary school, I try to get them onto a schedule where they have an evaluation in, if they haven't had one within the year, that they have an evaluation during their 5th grade year. So they're prepared with their most recent functioning to go to middle school. That puts them at their next evaluation being due in 8th grade,
Just
right?
before high school.
Which is before high school, which then puts their next evaluation due in
And that's the
11th grade. You can ask for the adult battery at that point in time, and then your dates come out the right way.
I'm telling you guys, this is invaluable information. And Marcia, I know that all of our viewers right now are asking the big question. And so, as to not give away exactly how much you charge, how much, give us a window of how much an advocate charges either pre, for, or after the whole experience. So,
So it really,
what can people look
yeah,
forward to
it
paying?
really varies based on, there are some advocates who charge a retainer fee, just like many lawyers.
Okay.
There are some who don't. I do not do that. What I usually do is I will usually charge for my initial intake upfront, because I'm doing a lot of work before I even meet with a family.
Yeah.
And then I charge based on time. But there are some advocates who are like, okay, I'm going to charge X number, X amount of money, and I'm going to say that the IEP meeting is going to be 2 hours. And if it's an hour, I've made a little money. If it's a little over 2 hours, I've
Lose a
lost a
little
little
money.
in the
Yeah.
wash. Yeah. I would say to have an initial meeting with, I can only give you my prices because everybody's varies.
Let's give
But
a
I'll
window.
give you a ballpark. I would say if you were having an IEP meeting and if there was some contention about it, and that's why you're bringing an advocate in, you don't feel like your kid is getting what they need, to do an initial consultation, probably some follow-up of writing a parental concerns note, drafting some potential goals and accommodations, and a typical IEP meeting, which I would say is usually between an hour and a half and 2 hours. And then the follow-up of looking at the IEP once it gets updated with all of the new information, because the only one who does it on site is Gwinnett County. You're probably going to be talking somewhere in the ballpark of probably somewhere between $600 and $750.
Okay. So that gives everybody a nice little idea of about where, and no, and this is probably across the board, Marcia, for people here in Georgia, for people in Louisiana.
If somebody is being quoted an amount of like $1,500, yeah, that's it for just one meeting. That's way out of the price range.
It's way out of the price range. And so we should all do our due diligence. And Marcia, is there a website that people can go to for you, or reach out to you to maybe ask any questions if maybe they're not local here to Georgia, or maybe they are and you can grab a few new clients?
And just so you know, I actually, though I don't do it very often, I have had clients who I've started with here who have moved to other states, and I've continued with them.
Oh,
IDEA law is national. There
okay.
are some unique pieces to each state, has some rules that may vary, and I may have to quickly learn what those rules are or reach out to an advocate, a colleague who I have in the area, to give me a quick lowdown. But oftentimes, if you have a little patience with me, and I'll figure it out quick enough.
Okay, good. Well,
So,
Marcia, give everyone your website and
so my website is Lindner, Lindner, educationalconsultants.com. And my phone number is 404-316-0591. They can reach me either way. They can text me on that at that number too. That's my mobile number. So unless I am, otherwise engaged, I usually answer you back within the day, but sometimes it may be, particularly during busy times or off times like the summer, it may be a day before I get back to you, but I will get back to you.
Well, I thank you so much, Marcia, for coming on because truly you did empower me. And I remember our meetings together and the initial consultation and me coming to your office and all of the good that it did for my son. And I know that if you are just getting the diagnosis and that your child is just going off to school, that as you navigate into a whole new world, it can be very scary. It can be very challenging. You may not know the questions to ask or when to ask them. And that's why everybody needs a Marcia. So, Marcia, thank you so much.
Gina, I just want to say, have me back on. If we're talking to families who maybe have just gotten a diagnosis and don't know about financial support that's out there, have me come back on to talk about Katie Beckett.
Oh, and there are so many different, you know what? I will. That's actually a great show. That's the best part. This is a journey for all of us parents who live life with the spectrum. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a mom. And I thought that this was a really great forum to get people together who have some similar situations and not so similar situations and ask those questions, big or small, get answers together and work through the journey together because I think we're stronger together. So
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
thank you so much. And again, like, comment, share. Remember, life with the spectrum. It's if you have somebody that you think I need to speak with, if you have questions, no bigger, no too small, or whatever the case may be, we're here to answer them right here with me. And until next time, see ya.